When Jesus was a young boy, a child pushed him as they were playing. And Jesus became incensed and made the boy fall dead. Joseph heard about it right away and found his son and took him by the ear and twisted his ear a little bit in punishment. Has anyone here ever punished their child in anger or in embarrassment? Has anyone here ever twisted a little ear or swatted a little bottom? It's a rather common reaction. And it was common probably in this little story because it shows the human nature of both Jesus and Joseph. Now, you can't find this story anywhere in our Gospels, but you can find it in the infancy Gospel of Thomas, a writing that didn't make it into the canon of our Bible. But sometimes the things that don't make it are as interesting as the things that did make it. What was it like for Jesus to grow up and become complete? Or in Wesleyan terms, moving on to perfection. Between his infancy and his appearance at the temple at 12 years old, we have no information in our Bible. And we have no information about his life between 12 years old of age and when he was baptized by his cousin John in the River Jordan. He was probably in his early 30s at that time. One reason we don't know anything about these years is because the gospel writers didn't think they were important enough to include them in their writings. Their focus was on Jesus' teachings, his adult ministry, his healings, and his salvation that he brought to all people of all times. They also put much of their emphasis on Jesus as fully God and mostly ignored Jesus as fully human as we know he was. Sometimes we do that too. We give some lip service to the fact that Jesus walked in our shoes, but we're much more interested in how he walked on water. We ignore the fact that he was completely human as he was completely divine. We would rather imagine Jesus with that aura around him and movie music playing in the background whenever he appears. We don't want to know if he ever used swear words, had bodily functions, or dated anyone. We want to put Jesus up on this pedestal that is almost untouchable. But there is a fully human side of Jesus that makes him complete and makes him perfect. And that inspires me to follow him. As post-biblical folk, we sometimes are curious about what the Bible doesn't say about Jesus. We wonder what happened to Joseph. We wonder when his brothers and sisters were born and what kind of relationship they had with their big brother, who was the Son of God. We wonder if he was ever naughty, if he was disciplined. We might wonder if he had girlfriends or if he became aware of his sexuality and his need for intimate friends with whom he could share his heart. We wonder how he was raised by his parents. And some of these questions can be answered by reading in between the lines of the Gospels. And some of them can be answered by studying the culture of the time and place and figuring out kind of what was typical for families and communities. Some of them have possible answers as we study the Gospels that weren't included in the canon of our Bible, and some of them just can't be answered. We know that when Jesus was a baby, he was taken to the temple. He was circumcised and he was named. These were important rituals for his parents to fulfill. They made Jesus a part of the covenant community, and it gave him his identity as a Jew. We know that later he was again taken to the temple, where he was redeemed as a firstborn male child with an offering. And that at the time Mary underwent her ceremonial purification after childbirth. Again, an offering was given when she presented either 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. These rituals underscore the point that Mary and Joseph did everything that was required of them by Jewish law. Luke emphasizes that everything was done in order. These things point out to us the conclusion that Mary and Joseph were conscientious parents and loved their child. And after they were done, Luke says that Jesus was then taken to Nazareth. He doesn't speak of their immigration to Egypt and then back again. But he says that Jesus grew up to be strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. To nurture a child so that she or he grows up strong and wise gives us insight into his or her childhood and early adulthood. Mary and Joseph must have surrounded Jesus with love, given him healthy boundaries, encouraged him, disciplined him, educated him, and modeled healthy relationships for him and his siblings. We know how hard this is, and all the time and the energy it takes to equip a child in all the right ways. And I'm sure, like all parents everywhere, they made mistakes and they have regrets. But when God chose Mary and Joseph to be the parents of Jesus and his brothers and sisters, God, as always, chose wisely, as God chooses for us. Parental relationships are key to a person's development. And there is some research that says that the same gender parent is the most influential to a child. As the nightmare of our government's purpose response to immigrants and asylum seekers at our southern border continues and in many ways is worse. I think about what we are doing to children's lives with the trauma that we're inflicting. I am also encouraged after our prayers and our searching that people are outraged in our country, and they have been moved to activism about this. They have been moved to activism about our policies, and we are looking more loving than we did a week ago. Part of the reason Jesus grew up to be the man he was is because of his family, and too many children are being robbed of their families. Not only the children who are on the border, but the children already in our care. because of the opioid epidemic, because of poverty, and because of parents throughout all spectrums who are not conscientious about the gifts they have been given. And we as Christians, we as a congregation, are called to step up and step in to nurture children in our church and in our community. And we have to ask ourselves, how are we doing? How are we as individuals doing to nurture the children in our church and in our community? When Jesus was 12 years old, he traveled to Nazareth, from Nazareth to Jerusalem with his family, as they did everywhere for the Passover feast, a tradition he continued throughout his life. They traveled in a large group of family and friends, which was customary. They went to temple for blessings and sacrifices, and had a huge meal together, remembering the Exodus so many years ago, the wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, and the hope of God blessing them with the promised land. They recalled the words of the prophets, whose words we have been studying over the last months. And they waited for Messiah to come, not knowing that their wait was almost over. And sometime after that Passover meal and the Sabbath, they gathered to begin their journey home. And one of the benefits of traveling with family and friends is that the children can play together. And they all looked after each other. And we know that Mary and Joseph were not negligent parents. But we do know how lost they felt when they realized their son was not with them. Something happened during that journey home to separate them from their eldest boy, and they didn't realize it right away. Somewhere along the journey, they realized that Jesus, their firstborn, the Son of God, was not with them. And if you have ever lost track of a child in your care, took your mind and your eyes off of them for one moment at a store or a park or a party, you know the panic that rises up in you. Your heart begins to pound as you look for them. And at first you try to stay calm because you think you're going to find them in just a moment. But then you realize that you aren't, and an alarm takes over. When Jesus wasn't with anyone in the group, Mary and Joseph fled back to Jerusalem as fast as they could. And if you have ever been a lost child, separated from your parents or the adults you were with, you also know the kind of fear that overcomes. And by instinct, a lost child wants the arms of their parents around them, and they just want to go home. Home is usually our safe place. When Mary and Joseph got back to Jerusalem, they searched everywhere they had been, and finally they found Jesus in the temple with learned teachers. They paused for a moment and listened to what was happening. Everyone was astonished by Jesus and the questions he asked. He showed an understanding that most adults didn't have. Mary and Joseph observed what was going on for just a little bit before their instincts took over, and they rushed to their son. And Mary may have given the pubescent boy an embarrassing kiss in front of everyone in the temple. Then she stood and said to the boy that they had been looking for them, and they were full of anxiety. been in his Father's house the whole time. He had gone to his spiritual home, the temple, for safety. He had gone home. His words confused them at the time, but they would understand later as they held this incident in their hearts. And they left Jerusalem together with Jesus. And Jesus, Luke says, was obedient to his parents, whom he loved and respected. His obedience was an important part of his growing to perfection. Mary never forgot this incident and was probably the source of its telling to the Christian community as stories were shared and eventually written. And Luke adds to this story one more sentence, also probably from Mary's telling, a phrase that seems so important to the telling. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and other people. Stature means years. He grew up and became complete for the things that God was calling him to do. He went through his teenage years with all those ups and downs. He had friends. He became more educated. He practiced the things we practiced during those years of our lives. He learned self-control, how to carry on a conversation. He practiced learning a trade in order to support himself and his family. He practiced living in gratitude instead of bitterness. He periodically checked his height compared to his dad. He got haircuts. He ate his parents out of house and home. He grew through what we now call young adulthood that didn't exist then. But with all those challenges and highs and lows, he became a man, empowered by his upbringing and by his faith and by his love for others. When we speak of Jesus' perfection, we don't speak in worldly ways. Perfection has nothing to do with how we look. It has nothing to do with how much money we make. It has nothing to do with how intelligent we are, how talented we are, or some superhuman ability to never make mistakes. That's not perfection. Perfection has to do with loving God and loving others, which in turn means that we do not condemn. We do not speak of or to others with negativity, that we love others as God loves us. What Luke proclaimed in this narrative twice is something that we are called to embrace in order to grow up and be perfected in love. We are to increase in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and others. This is what moves us on to perfection, the kind of perfection that God wants for us. So the question is, are we doing that? And that's not a rhetorical question. We need to think, are we doing that? Are we increasing in our stature? Are we living day to day so that God is pleased with us, so that we are able to honor other people? And when we are growing up in our faith, we will be more equipped to handle the chaos of our world, the chaos in our country, and in our own lives. We will be equipped as Christ's followers to embrace our humanity as well as the divine image in which we were created. We will be able to stand up, folks. We will be able to stand up against evil as victors and embrace the grace and the mercy of Jesus the Christ, our